Hey guys, welcome back once again. Steve at Niagara Fire Corals. Have you guys been wanting to set up a calcium reactor? It seems too complicated, too much to understand. Everything about it's difficult. Well, in this video today, I'm going to walk you through the setup and tuning of a calcium reactor, and hopefully you too will have the confidence by the end of this video to move on to a calcium reactor and reap the benefits they have to offer. Okay guys, so you want to set up a calcium reactor. First I'll go over the basics of what you're going to need to obviously set up your calcium reactor. To start with, you're going to need your reactor. This is an Aquamax T3 C-Tech. I believe this will run you $550 for this reactor. Obviously, it's Canadian dollars. I'm in Canada, so everything that I say here will be in Canadian dollars. You're going to need a solenoid. That particular one's in Milwaukee. They run about 150 bucks. That's a 10-pound CO2 tank. You're going to be about $200 for the CO2 tank. And this chamber here is optional. I chose to go with a secondary chamber simply because I wanted to help keep my pH of my system from dropping too much. This secondary chamber will run you approximately $120. You're going to need a pH probe, some type of pH control. I run the Apex, and this video will be based around running off of the Apex and how you use the Apex for tuning this and keeping it well tuned for your system's needs. You will also need a continuous duty dosing pump. I use a Kimura FX. I'll show that to you real quick here. The Kimura is up here, right there. That's what's running my calcium reactor. And those are the basics of what you're going to need to run this calcium reactor, or any calcium reactor for that matter. There are other ways of doing it, but what I'm doing today is showing you the absolute simplest way of running a calcium reactor, and your system will reap the benefits of doing so. Okay, so we're going to start out with the basics of how a calcium reactor works and what exactly it's doing. So in your chamber here, this is filled up with media that is essentially old actual pieces of coral, skeleton, things of that nature. This chamber, you're going to be injecting CO2 into it, which is going to come from your CO2 tank. It's going to follow that line, and it's going to come into this here. It comes in right here. This is a bubble counter. You'll probably read a lot about bubble counting online. That was the ways of the past. Bubble counting is, you don't need the bubble count anymore. And when we go on in this video, I'll show you why you don't need the bubble count anymore. Essentially what you're doing is you're injecting CO2 into this chamber, which is going to drop the pH level of this below 7. Once the pH of the water is below 7, it becomes acidic, and it is going to start breaking down this media slowly, which will come back out. In my case, goes into the secondary chamber here. If you didn't have this secondary chamber, this line here would just go directly back to your tank. But in my case, the secondary chamber comes in here, goes down, comes out of the secondary chamber, and then goes to the tank. This is going to be dosing back to your system at a rate that you choose, which I'll explain later. What is called the effluent. That is the liquid coming out of these two chambers. Once it's gone through, it's been injected with the CO2 and has picked up the alkalinity the calcium and all the trace elements off of this media that's being broken down, and it's being dosed back to your tank. You're going to be getting from old coral exactly what your new coral needs. Okay, guys, so we're going to move on first here to the solenoid and the basics of how they work. This gauge here on the left, that gauge there is showing you your tank pressure. As long as you're over 500, your tank is still great. And this gauge here is showing you your pressure that's coming out of the solenoid and going to your calcium reactor. Most solenoids want you to run around 10 psi. I know I'm a little high here, but it's because it's not currently on. When this turns on, this needle here actually drops down. This knob here is going to be what will turn up or down your main pressure on this gauge here. And this is another bubble counter that comes out of the side of the solenoid, and out goes the CO2 back to the calcium reactor. Now, this bubble counter I do use. I don't use it to count bubbles, but this little knob here, once you've got these set, which again, you want to set this to anywhere from, around 10 psi, you will slowly start to open this little knob here, and you'll see your bubbles start coming out. When your bubbles are coming out, you want them to be coming out 1 to 2 bubbles a second. Obviously, you don't want them just a steady stream of bubbles coming out super fast. That'll fill your reactor up with a ton of CO2 that's unnecessary. But you just want 1 or 2 bubbles coming out of here a second, and that should put you in the general area, and you can fine tune from there, which we'll go over further in this video. But this is your basic solenoid. Again, this is a Milwaukee. I've been running the Milwaukee now. I bought this one probably 3 years ago. I've had no issues with it. $150. I can't complain at all. There are ones out there that, are much more sophisticated. They'll, you can just kind of set the bubble count what you want, and it'll do it for you. But they are substantially more to purchase. That's completely up to you. But for the purpose of what I'm doing and what 99% of people out there need, one of these Milwaukees for $150 will do everything that you need, and you don't need to buy some extravagant solenoid that's going to cost you 4 times as much. Okay, so we're going to move on, and I'll go over a little more of the calcium reactors before we get into tuning them. All right. Okay, so looking at the top of the calcium reactor, this is a pH probe. That is the brains, the heart, everything of this system. That pH probe is going to tell your controller when to turn your solenoid on and off to keep the chamber in the range in which you're going to select that your tank requires for the purpose of keeping your system at whatever you run at, 8 DKH, 7.5, 8.5, whatever it is. This pH probe here is going to hold this chamber in the range that you are going to choose. I will go over that a little later in this video, but that pH probe is probably the most important thing that you need when running this calcium reactor the way I'm going to show you. And it is going to make your life super, super simple for tuning, keeping it tuned, and keeping your system fed with the appropriate alkalinity, calcium, and traces that it's going to get from your calcium reactor. Now, again, I will say that the secondary chamber there, it is not necessary. You don't have to have that. You can just get just the the main chamber with media. This is our media, in case anybody's wondering. I used to run the Reborn, but it became very difficult to get. I switched over to the ARM. I don't really have any complaints about it, other than it does cause this sandy like milk after the media is broken down, that kind of collects in the bottom of the reactor. I clean my reactor about once every 6 months. It's not a huge issue, but I'm just putting it out there. I didn't get that with the Reborn media, but I do get it with this ARM media. Aside from that, the ARM media works great. I've had no other issues with it. And so, yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know what media I'm using in here. And it's the ARM media. I use approximately 1 to 2 gallons a year. So you're looking at about anywhere from $40 to $80 a year it costs me, plus one tank. To get this filled, as long as it's in the 5 years, it's about $20. So you're talking, it's costing me to dose 450-gallon system about $100 a year. Okay, so I know the startup cost and the prices I've kind of given you on the tank, the solenoid, the calcium reactor itself, the secondary chamber, the Kimura pump, which is $350. It sounds like a lot for your startup, and it is. But guys, it comes back to you down the road, because the cost to run it after the fact is super, super cheap. And you kind of set these and forget them for sometimes months at a time. So we're going to get into that now, but I just wanted to give you guys kind of a little bit of a lowdown of my calcium reactor. Now, I do run a calcium reactor combined with dosing calc washer at night. I do have a video for that, and I will put it up at the end of this video if you guys want to go check that out. But we're going to move on, and I'm going to start breaking things down and how they work and how to tune things up. Okay, so we'll be right back. Okay, guys, so here we are. This is my continuous duty dosing pump. I just wanted to give you guys a quick view of this. As you can see, I'm running it at 60 mils a minute, and this lower line here that's coming into the Kimura, this one here, this is coming from the calcium reactor, and this is the effluent coming from the calcium reactor that's going down and into my system. I want to really stress one point here. Back in the day when we were running calcium reactors, we used to push smaller pumps, maxi jet pumps, things of that nature. We used to push through the calcium reactor, and we used to pinch off the end of the effluent, and we used to count how many drops going into the tank. All that crap is gone. You don't have to worry about that stuff anymore, guys. But I do want to just get one point across, that when you're running one of these continuous duty pumps, this line coming from the calcium reactor, notice I'm saying coming from. You want to pull water out of your calcium reactor. You don't want to be pushing water in. The reason I say that is pulling water from your calcium reactor, if one of these lines were to get plugged or something was to happen, you're not going to create back pressure in your calcium reactor. I did learn that firsthand. That's the reason I bought the Aquamax. Is my previous calcium reactor, I was pushing into it, and I actually blew the top right off of the calcium reactor and destroyed it. And that's why I bought the one that you've seen earlier in this video. So this is what we're doing now. We're pulling from the calcium reactor and then to the tank. By doing this, you'll never create back pressure. You'll never blow the top off or destroy your calcium reactor. It's just a safeguard. You'll have no issues with doing this. It's actually the way of the times now. So this is running at 60 mils a minute. I recommend you start anywhere from 40 to 60 mils when you're starting out. And this pump, at this point, when you're starting out, you'll set that, forget it. You can actually never touch that again, but you can use it later down the road for fine tuning your calcium reactor. But I'll go over that a little later. For now, when you guys are starting out, let's assume you've already set up your calcium reactor. The things I just went over, you've got your solenoid, you got your tank, you've got everything hooked up. Directions will come with whatever calcium reactor you get. So you have all those things hooked up. You now have your Kimura pump. You have water being pulled from your calcium reactor to your tank, and you're doing it 40 to 60 mils to start. Okay, your calcium reactor right now is just simply pulling your tank water through the calcium reactor. You're not dosing anything at this point. Now we'll get into starting to drop the pH level of your calcium reactor so it actually starts dosing your tank. We'll get into that now, and I'm gonna move on to a screenshot of some of my programming in my Apex, and I'll explain how it works and what exactly it's doing for this calcium reactor. All right, guys. So we'll head there now, and I'll put that screenshot up, and we'll talk about it.
Hey guys, I probably don't need to show you this screen, but I'm going to, just for anyone out there that might not be too confident with their Apex at this point. I don't know why I put the arrow to the reactor pump. That arrow should have been actually pointing at CO2. I just noticed that now. CO2, that's what I named the output or outlet that my solenoid is plugged into. If you slide that over and you touch that little gear right beside where it says off, or in the case where the arrow is where it says on, you tap that gear and it will bring you to the next screen where you actually can write your code for your CO2 tank or your solenoid. And I'll take you there now and show you what you'd see after touching this gear, and what I have written in that next screen to control the solenoid in the calcium reactor. So we'll head over there now, and I'll put up that next screenshot. Okay guys, so this is what you would see on the next screen after hitting that little gear. This is my programming I have written for my solenoid. So the outlet that the solenoid is plugged into, this is what I have written in that. The only thing you really need to pay attention to here is lines 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, you want the fallback to off. If there was an issue, it would just be off. It wouldn't be on. Okay, pH X4, that just is what my pH probe that's in the calcium reactor is called. Whatever you guys have yours called, that it would say that there. So you know, if you just use what came with your probe. So mine is off of a PM1 module. The PM1 module, that is just kind of the default of what the probe is called coming off of that module. So I didn't change it, so it's the PHX4. Anyways, the arrow that you see next to that, you can see one arrow is pointing to the right, one is pointing to the left. The one pointing to the right would be above, the one pointing to the left would be below. So what that second line is reading is, if that pH probe is reading above 6.50, then you want it on. So it will turn that outlet on. Okay? So your CO2 would start injecting. At that point, it will, inject CO2. The pH level of your chamber is going to start slowly dropping. And then line 3 simply says, if pH X4 is below 6.45, then off. So what that is going to do is it's going to hold your pH level in the chamber of the calcium reactor between 6.5 and 6.45. Okay? That's as simple as it can be. So from here, guys, when you start out, you're going to want to start this at like pH of 7 and 6.95. Start there. And then slowly start dropping this. If you are dosing already, 2-part calc washer, whatever you're dosing, and you're going to the calcium reactor, start at 7.0, 6.95, okay? And then start backing off what you're dosing a little bit at a time till you say you're at 8 DKH in your system. When that system drops to 7.8, start raising what you're dosing in with your calcium reactor. And by raising, what I mean is all you have to do is, if you started at 7.0 and 6.95, you would go to 6.95, 6.90. And then your next move would be 6.90, 6.85. You're just bringing the pH level of that reactor down, 0.5 at a time. And continue doing that every 1 to 2 days until your calcium reactor starts either holding the system where your current DKH is or slightly raises it. This is not a fast process. Don't be in a big hurry to do it. This could take you 2 weeks to a month to get this where you want it, but take that time. Take the time, do it slowly. Calcium reactors, the good thing about them is they don't normally change anything very quickly, so you don't get big swings. Okay, so that's all you're going to do, guys. Start at 7.00, 6.95. Back off what you're dosing just a little bit, enough to see a drop in what your system is at. And then every 1 to 2 days, keep lowering those 2 points in the programming, 6.95 to 6.90, 6.90 to 8.5, 8.5 to 8.0, and keep going down until you see the calcium reactor start picking up. At that point, continue backing off on what you're dosing and raising the calcium reactor until your calcium reactor takes over for what you're dosing. It's that simple, guys. And once it takes over, from there, I'm going to go into a couple more screenshots, and I'll be able to show you through your testing that you're going to be doing, and on a couple of your charts that you can see on your Apex when it's time to make some slight adjustments to that calcium reactor as your tank grows, from all the great things that are going to be happening to it now that you're running a calcium reactor. Okay, so we're going to move on to that next. I hope this makes sense, guys. If it doesn't, send me a message, ask me anything in the comments. I'll get back to you guys, and I'll talk one-on-one and hopefully be able to help anybody that needs it. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so like I did earlier in the video, most of you probably don't need this, but I thought I'd throw it in here just for anybody that may. As you can see here, this is the chart on the main Apex screen for pHx4, so that would be my pH probe that's in the calcium reactor. You would hit that little gear that the arrow's pointing at there to get into this next screenshot that I'm about to show you, where you can look and see to make sure that your calcium reactor is staying in the range that you've got it set for, and that that solenoid is doing its job in turning on and off as needed, and that everything is running as it should. Okay, guys, so we're going to go on to that screenshot now. Okay, guys, so what this screen here is going to show you, this is a chart of, this is a course of 1 day. Okay, this is the solenoid turning on and off, as you can see, holding my calcium reactor in the range that I have it set at. Um, Disregard that mine is up so high for such a big system. I wasn't using it. Now I'm using it again. I had some issues. Regardless, you can see that my CO2 is turning on and off in the range that I have it set for. And that is what you would use this page for. Now, at one point, you may see those spikes up and down. You may see them; they'll start spreading out. So as you start lowering the CO2 in your reactor, it starts having to work harder. So those spikes will start getting further and further apart, and eventually you'll hit a point in which it will not bottom out anymore. When that happens, that's when you have to go back and you have to adjust the small gold knob that I showed you on the solenoid. You have to just speed up the bubbles just a little bit, and that'll get that solenoid turning on and off again and making sure that you're bottoming out your range that you're trying to stay in. Alright guys, so I'm going to leave it here. Hopefully this video has helped you guys, but this piece of equipment right here is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. I myself was afraid of it, that's why I did this video. If you have programmed your Apex, if you can program a dosing pump, you can run a calcium reactor. They're that simple. Just remember, you're not in a big hurry. Slowly drop those pH points, and that is what's going to cause this to dose. Dropping those pH points will raise how much you're dosing into your system. Do it slow, 0.5 at a time. Good rule of thumb that I go by, if I usually run my system around 8. When I get down, I see it gets down to 7.8. I will drop it by a half a point. So if I'm running 6.6 to 6.55 and my DKH of my system goes down to 7.8, I would start running 6.55 to 6.50. That would bring my system back up to 8. These adjustments, I also want to point out, these aren't adjustments you're making daily or even weekly. These adjustments, especially if you have an established system, they are going to be weeks and weeks and weeks, months apart. It's not something you're doing all the time. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it here. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so you know when I put out new videos. And I'll see you guys on the next one. I'll leave you with a few shots of the tank after the recovery from my alkalinity and salinity swing. And if you guys have had any issues with your calcium reactors, or this video has encouraged you to run on out and buy one and start running one, drop something in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys and see what you're doing with your calcium reactors, or if I've encouraged you to give it a try. You won't regret it, and I look forward to hearing from everybody. So I'll see you guys on the next video, and happy reefing.